So we're looking at Taiwan again. Why are we looking at Taiwan again? Well, because the discussions of a potential invasion of Taiwan by China have reared its ugly head. And I feel like I have to talk about this about every 3 months or so. But this time it comes on the heels of U.S. Admiral John Aquilino saying that China is building its military at a rate not seen since World War II, and it is putting them on a path to meet its goals to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. It's worth noting that he actually said later on in his speech that he doesn't believe an invasion is imminent. And that's my point here. What we are seeing is once a year, it happens every year, these admirals come and sit in front of Congress and say China is building to invade Taiwan. And why do they do this? Because they want money. They want money so that they can continue to be ready in case it does happen. And I do not blame them for this. But you have to understand that when they go to Congress, they present the absolute worst case scenario so that they can get budget for the worst case scenario. Does it mean it's going to happen? No. In the military, we have the most likely scenario, and then we have the most dangerous scenario or most deadly scenario, or whatever you want to call it. This is the most dangerous scenario. On the other side of this discussion is China. Why is Xi Jinping saying he wants to be ready by 2027? Well, it just so happens that in 2027 is the Chinese Communist Party Congress. This is when Xi Jinping faces re-election within his own party. And while he has consolidated power, it is not certain every time this Congress meets. He could lose his seat. And so he needs tangible efforts to show he is moving towards something he has said in the past. And this time he said he wants to reunify Taiwan, preferably in a peaceful manner is what he said, but by force if necessary. And that is what we are looking at. He wants to be able to walk in front of the Chinese Communist Party Congress and say, I told you we would be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. And here we are. Look at all this equipment, all these boats. We are ready to invade. And then he will turn and quietly say to himself, doesn't really mean I'm going to invade Taiwan. But can tell them he's ready. And that's what's taking place here from both sides of this situation. Because as I've said, this is just not sustainable for the Chinese to try to invade. There's just no way that this works for China. Taiwan has been preparing for an invasion by the Chinese for over 70 years. Ukraine had 7 years, and we're seeing how tough it is for Russia to conduct operations in Ukraine. You think China is going to cross a strait that's 100 miles long and be able to do it? And the thing is people think about Taiwan. When they think about Taiwan, they think, oh, this is Taiwan. Well, actually, this is Taiwan too. And oh yeah, this is Taiwan too. Just a reminder, this is China. Why hasn't China taken Kinmen Island from the Taiwanese? Well, there's other factors at play here that China is aware of and doesn't want to deal with. An invasion of this small island that is like a 30-minute ferry ride from mainland China means that China will likely incur massive sanctions, loss of business, loss of partnerships, and loss of critical trade with US, Canadian, European, just Western partners in general, which is why they have not invaded. Make no mistake, this island, heavily defended. The Taiwanese have set up their defenses on this island to be basically a speed bump, slow down the Chinese in case so the mainland can respond, the allies of the Taiwanese can respond, etc. But the reason China hasn't made a move on this island at all is because they fear the wrath of sanctions and lost business, which they cannot afford in their current economic state. And then on top of that, I just want to reiterate how much of an impossibility it is for China to take this island from Taiwan. So the Taiwan Strait is 100 miles across. 100 miles. There are only 12 landing points that are suitable for an amphibious invasion. 12 landing points, and I'm not going to highlight them all, but you get the point. So the Taiwanese really only have to defend 12 landing sites. People will say, well, China will soften them up with missiles. Yeah, Taiwan already thought of that. Much of their military infrastructure is embedded into this vast mountain system in the center of their island, so it's survivable up to nuclear strikes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the strait, this is all open port system. So when we all in the entire world watch as China starts building up the capacity to conduct an amphibious invasion where millions of troops are required to cross this strait, and we're all going, hey, what the heck? Why are all these boats showing up and all these soldiers showing up? Taiwan can prepare by just pre-sighting these port systems in. And the minute a singular boat launches in a belligerent manner towards Taiwan, this whole port system is destroyed. So the first wave of amphibious assault is the only one getting out the door here. And then there's just nothing more for China to do. There is no airborne capacity because, again, this is a bunch of crappy mountains to try to land in, and you're going to try and land airborne assaults into urban areas. That's just not going to happen. Second of all, the Taiwanese have submarines, they have aircraft, they have coastal artillery, they have missiles, they have mines. All of this can be ramped up in preparation for the invasion, and China knows this. China would lose hundreds of thousands in the first few days of this war. People will say, what about China using civilian car carriers? Again, those aren't super well designed to try to cross the strait in this manner outside of that October or March timeframe, but they're undefended. They're civilian boats. You're going to force civilian captains into a war zone. They're not going to be very happy. They're going to be untrained. They frankly are going to be a liability and get in the way of actual military operations if they're trying to cross in civilian car carriers. But let's say somehow there's a miracle and you land enough troops to form a beachhead somewhere. Let's just say like here. What do you do then? You got no supplies. You're going to try and live off a country that hates you absolutely because you've just invaded them. This is Ukraine times 1,000 for China. There is no logistics line here that goes back to resupply. You don't get to just suddenly have boats that easily run back and forth between the two locations during a war. There's no road here like the Russians have in Ukraine. There's no rail here. How is the resupply conducted? Just from a purely analytical perspective, there is no way that China can take this island and hold it. But Xi Jinping can't say that. Admirals don't want to say that because they want the ability to have the budget in case it does happen. And there is a greater possibility that the U.S. Navy would have to deal with a potential blockade where Taiwan is under a quarantine, quote unquote, or a blockade by China, which frankly the U.S. would look China directly in the face, give them the finger and run that blockade because, again, the Chinese don't want to challenge the supremacy of the U.S. Navy here. They don't want to challenge the business will of the United States to impose very devastating sanctions on China. China is not as self-sufficient as Russia, so China needs these partners. Again, that's why this island still belongs to Taiwan. And all of this combined is just the reasons why, once again, I don't foresee Taiwan being taken by China or even an attempt by China to take Taiwan anytime soon.